Did you win this past week?
2 out of 3. The one league I lost to Sarge, so that kind of sucks. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know how I made the playoffs. I made it with like Band-Aids and glue to the playoffs. So I was just happy to say I even made it, to be honest. But 2 leagues, I'm in the semifinals now. My one team is just so stupid. Like, even without Antonio Gibson, like with David Montgomery's emergence, like I have Rodgers and Adams, that Green Bay stack, and then I got Travis Kelce, and then Montgomery, and I had Gibson.
Man.
So if Gibson, I don't know if Gibson's going to go. I mean, turf toe, that could be his season. So.
Yeah. Or maybe his career, I could follow him around like it's followed Julio Jones around.
There was somebody, I can't think of who the player was, that's retired now, that said like they still like feel it.
Dude, I was about to say turf toe is like not a bullshit injury, man. Like I would not want to have that.
All right. Are you ready?
Yeah.
3, 2. Welcome to the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show, proudly presented by Crowworthy. Winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, fantasy, and more. Follow at Crowworthy on Twitter. Visit us at the crowworthy.com Pittsburgh City page for podcasts like this one, blogs, and more. I'm Smitty. With me, as always, my co-host, Donnie Druin. Donnie, what is going on?
As a Christian McCaffrey owner, I'm looking for reasons to still be on this earth right now, man.
I know. The thing is, too, like with your team, that should be like a team that can kind of take that loss. But with Alvin Kamara, and granted, he just had a nice week this past week, you know, the weeks that he's had in the past with Taysom Hill, same thing. I believe you have Michael Thomas on that team as well, right? So, yep. I mean, you are tying your fantasy season to the arm of Taysom Hill right now.
Yeah, it's not great. I will say McCaffrey played, 3 games this year?
Something like that,
yeah. I think he played 3 games. I finished with the best overall record in the league. So I think I still have a chance. But, man, out of the 4 playoff teams right now, definitely the weakest. So we'll see. I know that you had mentioned that you went 2 out of 3 in your leagues this week.
Yeah, I mean, I got a ridiculous stack in my one league with Aaron Rodgers. I believe, in my opinion, at this point, has taken over Patrick Mahomes for league MVP. And I got a ridiculous stack with him and Devontae Adams, who has a touchdown in 8 straight games. And then I have Travis Kelce, who might as well be a wide receiver. He leads the league in receiving yards this year as a tight end. And then my top 2 running backs for most of the year had been Antonio Gibson and David Montgomery. Montgomery really coming on 3 straight 20-point performances. And then Antonio Gibson obviously had been a beast pretty much all year. All he does is score touchdowns. Of course, he has turf toe now, so I got to try to find a way to maneuver around that. There's a couple guys, and I don't want to say their names yet, that I will actually bring up later in the show. One is a receiver that I can play at the running back position that I might be using this week should Antonio Gibson not be able to go. I just grabbed him yesterday, but we'll see. But yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about that league for sure. My other league, it's really a toss-up. The projection shows 50-50 right now, so we'll see. And it's a winner-take-all league, so even if I win this game, I still got to win the next one to earn any money back. So it's going to be fun. I do see we have some people here already in the chat asking questions, so that's great. Let's get to them before we start talking about our topics. As always, I did tweet out what we're going to be talking about. So there's some guys that we really like their playoff matchups, maybe guys that you normally wouldn't be starting, guys that you're on the fence about. They have really good match with this week. We're going to tell you to start them. Maybe some playoff guys that we don't necessarily love their matchups. You know, the superstars that have gotten you here, maybe a little bit, weary on. Now, if you have some of the quarterback I'm going to bring up, I know he's going to be in your lineup. He has to be in your lineup every week. But I would just be I'd be tempering my expectations for that matchup a little bit. And then, of course, the waiver wire we'll bring up, which I hope and pray that you really don't need help on the waiver wire this week because it doesn't look great, as Donnie and I can both attest to. But before that, like I said, we did get some questions in. Let me pull them up real quick. I saw them come in, but I didn't get to read them in time before they disappeared from my screen here. So let me go on my phone and see what we got so far. I know Tyler's in here. Todd said, can y'all help me choose? Must start 3. Kamara, James Robinson, Kenyon Drake, Jonathan Taylor, Mike Davis, Jeff Wilson. Well, Kamara and James Robinson are must starts at this point. And then I would eliminate Jeff Wilson. So I think you got a decision 1 of 3 between Kenyon Drake, Jonathan Taylor, Mike Davis, assuming McCaffrey isn't going to play, and that absolutely looks like it's going to be the case. Man, I don't know. Kenyon
Mike
Drake.
Davis had a strong game last week.
I know. I mean, all three of these guys, honestly, like
Yeah.
Kenyon Drake's a guy that people, have been talking about. Edmonds taking the workload away and everything like that. But 3 straight games that he scored 18 plus points. I mean, Jonathan Taylor had a big game for Indianapolis this past week. And then you just mentioned Mike Davis in the absence of Christian McCaffrey. That's a guy where if you got that handcuff or something like that, or you were able to pick him up off waivers when McCaffrey started missing time, that, you might have gotten all the way to this point with a guy like that because of a guy like that. So, man,
I will say purely opportunity-wise, I do think I like Mike Davis out of those three just because in Arizona you do have Chase Edmonds, which granted you just said, Kenyon Drake's peeled off 18-point performances left and right the last couple of weeks. So you have Edmonds in Arizona, and then in Indianapolis you obviously have Naheem Hines behind Jonathan Taylor, and then in Carolina it's basically just Mike Davis show.
Yeah, you're absolutely right there.
I don't dislike any of those options, though.
No, I think that you're in a phenomenal situation here to have that roster of running backs where it's even a decision like this. Again, Kamara and James Robinson are guys that you've been, riding out to this point. And I can definitely see why with these running backs, you're in the position where you're in the, fantasy championship semifinals like this week is presumably for you. So I'd be using, Kamara, James Robinson, and I think I'm slightly with you. It would be really tough if he had to pick a fourth one between Drake and Jonathan Taylor for me. But I think because of the workload, I'm with you on Mike Davis. Jeff Wilson, I could roll out right away. And it's nothing against Jeff Wilson. He's looked very good at times running in San Francisco. They have running backs galore there when they're all healthy. But he has looked very good at times. And if the opportunity were to be there for him, where he was a clear-cut number one somewhere, maybe he would be the guy that I would choose. Yeah, Tyler is right. Donnie has his Christmas tree in the back showing more Christmas spirit than I am right now. I got to maybe get something up here. Carson or MT at flex, asked Carlos. You put one of those guys in a flex, man. How strong is this? What are these teams?
I'd love to see that team, man. Yeah. Carson's got his workload taken away pretty recently, man. Rashad Penny's kind of been on the rise, and Carlos Hyde has been getting a decent chunk of carries the last couple of weeks. Michael Thomas has definitely rebounded. I think he's had 2 strong games in a row the last 2 weeks. I will say that Kansas City's secondary actually ranks as one of the top secondaries.
Yeah, why?
I have no idea. Just in terms of limiting opponents' receivers to points and stuff, fantasy-wise. Who's Seattle playing? Seattle plays Washington.
Yes.
That's it's not an ideal matchup either. If it's a PPR league, I would be enticed to go Michael Thomas there.
Yeah, I'm with you. Again, that's a ridiculous decision that you have to make like that. Not have Chris Carson as your RB2 or know that Michael Thomas isn't one of your top 2 receivers. I mean, that's insane. So props to you for having that team, but I would be using Michael Thomas. Listen, you drafted him as high as you did, hoping to get to the point where you are with him having a huge season. Now, it hasn't paid huge dividends. He's not the primary reason you're in this position right now, but I think that you got to let him be in a position where he can try to be the guy that wins you some money in this league because of where you drafted him. So I think he's a must start.
No, I would definitely agree.
So yeah, let me see here. Did we do anything else? I know Tyler had said a remark about, should I play Lynne Bowden and Gerald Everett against the Jets, who are last in terms of doing points against tight ends and flex spots? Also, Hurts or Ryan in my super flex TB spot. This is assuming Gibson doesn't play because I have Pittman also going and Cole as my other legitimate options. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think that Antonio Gibson plays either, as you alluded to there. Lynne Bowden, and I'm mad that his name got brought up already because he was the guy I was talking about a little bit earlier in the show as a guy that I would play at running back, even though he's a guy that lines up at receiver primarily for the Dolphins. And I like how the Dolphins are using him. They're really getting him more involved. Granted, we saw, his involvement maybe increased largely due to the injuries that they suffered with the other pass catchers. Devontae Parker got hurt in that game. Jakeem Grant got hurt in that game, and Mike Gesicki also got hurt in that game. So that obviously opened up the door for Lynne Bowden in this game. But with what he did, I think that he's carved out a little bit of a role for himself there. And I think that he's definitely, he has a solid floor this week due to that. He's a guy that I think you could definitely put in your fantasy football lineups. And so you said Lynne Bowden and Gerald Everett.
But like Everett's not even the top tight end on that team, and there's still Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp as like primary pass catchers for Jared Goff.
At first I was reading this as and it's easily Lynne Bowden for me, but I'm wondering who you would have to possibly use Gerald Everett over. The one that I'm intrigued about here, the option, Jalen Hurts or Matt Ryan as a super flex QB option.
Matt Ryan versus Tampa Bay probably is going to work out like people want it to.
Without Julio, right? I mean,
I thought it's questionable.
I guess I'm just assuming at this point that he's not playing until he does. Although he didn't play last week, so he probably will play this week and then won't play the following week. That just seems it's like one on, one off for him. So I don't know if he did if he's done anything this week, what it looks like, but yeah, I think with the upside of what he could do with his legs as well, I'm going Jalen Hurts here.
Yeah, I gotta go Hurts too. And I mean, I'll talk about him a little bit later in the show, but he had over 100 yards rushing last week. You know, he still managed to scrape by 20 fantasy points. And as a fantasy quarterback who can do that on the ground, I feel like that gives you a much safer floor whenever it comes to things breaking down. Than
last week's waiver wire QB pickup.
That's right. Yeah,
he was only owned in 4% at the time.
Well, now he's jumped up to about 13%. And ESPN leagues because he's my waiver wire suggestion on the week as well. But yeah, it's just so to go back to Julio, he's listed as questionable right now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only Tuesday and they play on Sunday, so a lot of stuff can change between now and then.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, no, this has been good. You know, keep the questions coming if you guys have them, and we will tell you about one of our sponsors while we wait and see if any of those come in, and then we'll get to our regularly scheduled content of the week. So our partners at Manscaped are looking to stuff your stockings this winter. Look no further. They have the tools to make you win this year's stocking stuffer or white elephant competition. Manscaped is the only brand dedicated to below-the-waist grooming and hygiene products. Great news. They just released their products across Europe, Canada, and Australia. I have pretty much all of these products. I can attest to it firsthand that they smell great. They feel great. They look great. Everything about them is great. The Crop Preserver Ball Deodorant, name speaks for itself. Don't need to tell you anything else about that. The Crop Reviver Ball Toner is a spray-on toner that would give your balls a little slice of heaven with their aloe vera and hazel extracts. The Crop Cleanser Body Wash, I talk about that all the time because I literally use it on the daily. It's a full body wash that you can also use on your hair. They have the ball wipes, the crop mops. You never know when opportunity is going to strike. You should always be prepared. Foot duster, foot deodorant. Tyler talks about that a lot more than I do. Granted, I also have it, but he uses it on a lot more regular basis. The new Weed Whacker just came out recently. It's a nose and ear hair trimmer, which provides proprietary skin-safe technology to get rid of those nasty nose hairs. I'm proud of myself for being able to pronounce that word. So thank you, Manscaped, for throwing that in there and testing my vocabulary. Let's not forget about the best trimmer around, which is the Lawnmower 3.0 trimmer. It offers a replaceable ceramic blade with advanced skin-safe technology, which helps reduce grooming accidents. All these formulations are cruelty-free, vegan, dye-free, sulfate-free, so you know the products are legit. You can get 20% off plus free shipping when you use the code 412 at checkout at manscaped.com. That's code 412 at checkout at manscaped.com, and you'll get 20% off plus free shipping. Whether this is for your partner, dad, brother, friend, get them something that they will actually use and is almost sure to get a laugh, which I can also attest to. So your balls will thank you. We will thank you. And then your partner, brother, dad, friend, whoever it might be will thank you. So there's just going to be a lot of thanks going around when you order from manscaped.com and use code 412 at checkout. Okay, so let's get into this, Donnie. There's some guys that have matchups we love. There's some guys that have matchups that we don't love so much. Mm-hmm. And let's start at the tight end position, a position that, for lack of a better word, is kind of terrible. You don't get a lot of production from this position unless you have one of those top tier guys. It leaves you constantly looking at the waiver wire and stuff like that. So this is a position that I think, you do see a lot of streaming options even this time of year, because if you don't have that Travis Kelce, that Darren Waller, that Mark Andrews coming on recently, nice game against the Browns. If you don't have one of those types of guys, you're constantly looking at that waiver wire, seeing if there's a better option out there. So tight end matchup that I really love this week, a guy that has underperformed for most of the season, it's going to be Jared Cook going against the Kansas City Chiefs here, who give up the 7th most points to the position, and he also has a multiple double-digit points in a row now. With Taysom Hill at quarterback, might not be a great thing for guys like Alvin Kamara. It's been a pretty solid thing for the likes of Jared Cook. He's had a pretty solid floor with Taysom Hill at quarterback. He's looking his way a lot, and when you get down into the red zone, he's a primary option in that passing attack. So granted, the whole season outlook has not been very great for Jared Cook. If you took him hoping to get tight end one production, you haven't been getting it. But now in here in your fantasy football semifinals, he gets a really good matchup with a quarterback that seems to be looking his way a lot.
Yeah, we might just get through my entire waiver wire suggestion list before we actually get there, because Jared Cook is my suggestion of the week. Owned in exactly 50% of ESPN leagues, but you already touched it, back-to-back double-digit weeks. He's really been coming on as of late with Taysom Hill at quarterback. The Chiefs ranked 25th versus tight ends in terms of allowing points per game to them. So, I mean, as far as matchups go, you're not going to find anything much better than that. But for me at the tight end position, I went Robert Tonyan versus the Carolina Panthers this week. 4 straight double-digit outings with 4 straight touchdowns. Panthers ranked 26th versus tight ends in terms of points per game, fantasy-wise. Tonyan, he doesn't get a whole lot of looks. He's not Kelsey. He's not Kittle. But, man, does Aaron Rodgers love to find him when it matters most.
Kittle Light is the nickname. He works out with him. He kind of looks like him, too. I mean, like, physically, he looks like George Kittle. He's not at that level yet, but I think that, the more Aaron Rodgers looks his way, the more he continues to work out with this guy in the offseason. I think that Green Bay has finally solved that tight end issue that they've been working, that they tried to solve with Jimmy Graham, and that obviously didn't work out the way that they had hoped. But yeah, Robert Tonyan has really made a name for himself this year, especially in the red zone. It's going to be him or Devontae Adams. He's become that second option in the passing game. We always have been talking about who's the other guy on the opposite side of Devontae Adams. They don't have a wide receiver too. Well, the guy that's lining up at the line of scrimmage, Robert Tonyan, has been that second option in the passing game. So obviously I really like that pick as well. The tight end matchup that I hate is actually going to be a guy that I have on one of my rosters. I'm not using him this week, but it's going to be Dallas Goedert going against the Arizona Cardinals, who give up the 5th fewest points to the position. Still relatively, at least for Philadelphia standards, heavily targeted by Jalen Hurts. He, led the team in targets, still had 4 catches. But I just feel like, and we both talked about this, has been a heavily discussed topic on here, the presence of Zach Ertz. I still think Dallas Goedert is going to be the primary tight end. I think that that's just the way that Philadelphia is going. But Zach Ertz's presence certainly doesn't help a guy like Dallas Goedert for when you're talking about trying to consume all these targets. Also, the emergence of Jalen Reagor. I don't know who Jalen Hurts' number one option is going to be, but I can tell you that these guys, if they all start to come on at the same time, it's bad news for Dallas Goedert. And for a team that's not giving up a lot of points right now to tight ends, I don't love the matchup this week.
Yeah, as a guy who owns Dallas Goedert, I'm kind of sweating right now. And, for everything you just gave to me and everybody else watching and listening, definitely not great news, especially if you need to play him in, a fantasy football semifinal or maybe even the final this week, depending on your league. I absolutely agree with you. And I especially think that Alshon Jeffrey all of a sudden decided to wake up and wanted to play football now that he has a different quarterback. So, yeah, that's definitely not working in his favor either. My tendency would be Jonnu Smith versus Detroit. Definitely going to be sitting him. Not a crazy surprise. A lot of people have fallen off Jonnu Smith. He's actually owned in just about 63% of leagues on ESPN. He scored a whopping 4 points last week. And we talked about, his touchdown production and how basically it was boom or bust. And he certainly hit a dry spell just in terms of being at the tight end position. With Derrick Henry set to rush for basically what people are assuming to be 200 yards a game for the rest of the season. Game flow is not necessarily going to want to work for him. You have guys like A.J. Brown tearing it up. You have guys like Corey Davis playing that nice little complimentary role there as well. So Jonnu Smith's fallen off the map and doesn't get any easier versus Detroit this week.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I disagree and such because I'm a huge Jonnu Smith fan. I think he's one of the best athletes at the position the league has to offer. But, right now with the way that they're going for a run-first team, when you're the third option at best in that passing attack, it's just not playing to your favor. And you mentioned the words boom or bust. That's exactly what Jonnu Smith is. I don't know if there's a better guy to, if you look up boom or bust, if you just Google search that, a picture of Johnny Smith might come up.
Yep.
So there you have it. I can't believe that it's 2020 in the wide receiver matchup that I love and a guy that I would absolutely have in my lineups this week with Phillip Rivers playing quarterback is T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts going against the Houston Texans, who are giving up the 9th most points to the position. T.Y. Hilton has 4 touchdowns in his last 3 games, and he scored at least 16 points in all those games. So this guy is getting hot at the right time, a guy that isn't even being rostered in a lot of leagues now, which is crazy to think because he was a borderline wide receiver 1 just a few years ago when Andrew Luck was still in town. Obviously, that is a huge role. Also, T.Y. Hilton's not getting any younger, but these last couple weeks, he's really started to come into his own. He's saved his best for last in 2020, and he might just win a lot of people some money. If you could grab him on the waiver wire a couple weeks ago, or if you all had him on your bench and all of a sudden you're looking at a guy that's providing wide receiver 1 numbers over the course of the last month or so.
Yeah, my history with T.Y. Hilton is not great.
It's well documented.
I told myself I would not draft him again, and I've done a very good job of exactly doing that. But you might sway me. He's definitely picked things up in the last couple of weeks. He looks almost a completely different player than he did at the beginning of the year with Phillip Rivers at quarterback. I think it's just them finally gelling and meshing together. A lot of people think Michael Pittman Jr. is going to be the guy to explode this year. While that has been the case for a couple of weeks, T.Y. Hilton let everybody know that he's still Indianapolis' number 1 receiver. So I also like the matchup. Very, very good for him as well. My wide receiver matchup that I love this week, and I've been pumping this guy up week after week on his podcast and Bone to Forks up, because it's Brandon Ayuk versus the Dallas Cowboys secondary. The 26th ranked pass defense, Deebo Samuel, not playing the rest of the regular season. Most people don't believe so. Ayuk's averaging 20 points over his last 5 weeks. He has become the new wide receiver 1 in San Francisco with George Kittle still out and with Deebo Samuel now out of the picture. He put up season highs whenever Deebo Samuel went out of I believe the first or second play of the game last week. And this kid looks legit. And, fantasy purposes, who else are you going to throw into that offense? And Ike's done a very good job of capitalizing on his opportunity. And now opportunity this week meets matchup. So I really like Ayuk for week 15.
Part of one of the best wide receiver classes we've ever seen. He's not being talked about a whole lot, but yeah, he is a stud. And you mentioned the biggest part of all of it is Deebo Samuel being shut down. So Brandon Ayuk is set to be the focal point of that passing attack for the rest of the year, which should be a great audition for him to see if he's capable of filling that role. So yeah, I'm very excited about it. Unfortunately, the team that I have him on was just eliminated, so it's not really going to matter much, but we'll see what he does in a meaningless fantasy football playoff game next week. Okay, so the matchup that I hate, and this might surprise some people with the absolutely insane production this guy's put up this year, it's going to be Adam Thielen. He has 51 yards or fewer in 7 of Minnesota's games this year, so he's incredibly touchdown dependent. Now, good news for Thielen owners is he scored 12 touchdowns this year, so more than often than not, he's scoring touchdowns. But should he not get in the end zone, I mean, he's not completely boom or bust because he's doing it so often, but should he not get in the end zone, he's not going to have a great fantasy day because he doesn't put up the yardage numbers. And going against Chicago here, they give up the 3rd fewest points to the position. So I don't love the matchup this week. If Kirk Cousins does not have a great game against Chicago, it means Adam Thielen's not going to have a great game. And that's what I see happening against this defense.
As somebody who's playing Thielen this week, that is music to my ears. So thank you very much. Shout out to Logan Bell. I hope you lose every single matchup this week, including to me. But yeah, no, Chicago is always a very tough draw. I feel like, especially against Kirk Cousins and with Justin Jefferson, it's just taken a whole lot of responsibility away. That has somewhat freed up Adam Thielen, but yeah, he's been extremely not hit or miss. But yeah, if he's not scoring, he's not doing a whole lot underneath before the goal line. My star wide receiver, who I'm not necessarily super sure about, actually, I might even bench him this week, Tyler Lockett versus the Washington football team defense, widely considered to be one of the pass defenses in the league. Outside of 2 games versus Arizona, he hasn't scored any higher than 12.3 points in fantasy football PPR formats. He's just disappeared since the emergence of DK Metcalf. And you're looking at me funny, but yeah, I went and looked, and 12 points outside of Arizona games is the highest he scored. I think at least when it comes to wide receiver position, he is the definition of boom or bust.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at both those matchups, but DK Metcalf as well, and not necessarily because I don't think DK Metcalf has a great day, but he's projected the second highest point total at the position this week, and I was like, going against Arizona, who's Seattle play? Washington. Sorry, I almost said Arizona because you said Arizona. The numbers that they put up against Arizona. Times. But yeah, going against Washington, I mean, we know firsthand from that matchup against Pittsburgh how good that defense is, and not just pass defense. They did after the quarterback too. So should Russell Wilson have a lot of time, we know how bad Seattle's offensive line is as well. Russell Wilson's already taken 40 sacks this year. What kind of numbers are those guys going to be able to put up? You talked about the guys that they have, in Fuller and, Jimmy Moreland, who I feel like is kind of an underrated corner. Ronald Darby's having a pretty solid season as well. They're three deep at corner. So I can definitely understand why Tyler Lockett is a guy that you would be pretty weary of. I feel like, how many teams have better options than having him as, a number 2 or 3. But I definitely do think you have to temper your expectations this week for him.
And I feel like the only thing is, like, you don't want to put a guy like that on your bench and just watch him go off. But, like, the probability of him doing that this week versus Washington, very minimal.
Okay, so the running back that I actually really love this week, it's going to be Deandre Swift going against the Tennessee Titans, who give up the 7th most points to the position. He's at double-digit points 4 out of his last 5 outings, so he has really come on ever since really being given the reins in that backfield over Kerryon Johnson and Adrian Peterson. Deandre Swift's game has taken off, both on the ground and also receiving. We're talking about a guy that has seen consistently 5 targets a week. So PPR formats, this is a guy that's giving you RB2 value right now. And I think that he's definitely a guy that has to be in every single lineup.
No, Deandra Swift is actually my running back matchup of the week that I love as well. And just to add on top of that, Matthew Stafford is questionable to play on Sunday. So, if Stafford doesn't play, I think that's more inclination for the Lions to go to the run game. Deandra Swift coming off of a concussion. He was kind of worked into the lineup last week. Adrian Peterson had a handful of carries. Kerryon Johnson had a handful of carries, and I believe he scored a touchdown last week as well. But to keep using the phrase we love on the show, I think he'll be given the keys to the car this week. And I think all signs are a go for Deandre Swift versus the Titans.
Yeah, they do have a stud backup Chase Daniel, though, running the show there, if Matthew Stafford's out. That dude has made a ton of money. I love that guy, actually.
I will never hate on Chase Daniel for the amount of money he's made, man.
Okay, and then the running back matchup that I hate, I mean, I hate to keep harping on the guy in this show, but it's going to be Zeke Elliott, who goes against San Fran this week. He's got the 5th fewest, San Fran is allowed the 5th fewest points to the position. And surprisingly enough, I don't know if people will believe this, 8 straight games for Ezekiel Elliott without a rushing touchdown. Going back to week 5 where he scored 2 against the Giants, he hasn't scored 1 since then. And also, since that game in week 5, he's only put up double-digit points twice. So, do not like this matchup for Ezekiel Elliott here. Again, this is a guy, man, you took him in the first round. You feel like you got to be playing him. I get it. And, probably he would be in my lineup if I had him. So, don't think I'm not taking my own advice when I say this. I'm just saying you might want to temper those expectations, which by this point in the season, having that production, where the baseline has been for Ezekiel Elliott in the last 8 weeks. I feel like your expectations probably already have been, tempered to the point they're at.
Yeah, Zeke's actually my running back I'm avoiding this week as well. I mean,
look at this.
Yeah, I know. Sometimes you have the same guys, but very rarely do we mirror both the good and bad for one position. So I'll just kind of pile on top of everything you just said. Tony Pollard had 1 less carry than him last week. Not a good sign. Pollard has kind of dug himself a nice little role in that Dallas backfield, which a lot of people thought was going to happen last year. But 2020 has been kind of a little emergence of Pollard. He's very risky this week, only 7.9 points last week versus a very, very poor Cincinnati Bengals defense. And if he's not going to score a whole ton of fantasy points versus the Bengals defense, I have no inclination to think he will do the same thing versus a San Francisco 49ers top 5 rushing defense.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually didn't even know about, Pollard only having 1 less carry. So yeah, that obviously plays into it as well. But for a guy that's still popping up, as a top 15, top 20 play, the production hasn't been there to warrant it. He's literally just there right now because of his name.
1 less touch, excuse me, not carry, just touch.
Oh, okay.
But
yeah. So the quarterback that I love, it's going to be Jared Goff, who goes against the Jets this week. Not a largely impressive touchdown to interception ratio this year, 18-11. But it's the Jets who are giving up the second most points to the position. We saw what Russell Wilson just did to this defense. And for me, more so than Jared Goff, it's just about the weapons. When you have Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp and Cam Akers, man, coming on in that running game. And you already talked about one of the tight ends we did in Gerald Everett. He also has Tyler Higbee there. It's just, Josh Reynolds can contribute a little bit. I'm a big fan of Van Jefferson. Granted, he hasn't had a huge role this year, but going forward, I think that's a guy in this league. So for me, it's more so about the weapons than Jared Goff. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Those weapons are going to help Jared Goff have a huge fantasy day against the Jets when it comes down to it.
Yeah, you've been a guy who's been pumping up Jared Goff the last couple of weeks, and he's been putting out, fairly decent fantasy football numbers. I mean, he had a rushing touchdown last week, for God's sake. So Goff has been somewhat of a steady but underrated guy when just looking at the quarterback position. So I definitely do like his matchup this week. I'm going to flip mine to Tom Brady versus Atlanta. The Falcons have the absolute worst passing defense in the NFL, along with the most points to fantasy quarterbacks. I think Tampa Bay's offense is starting to kind of hit that point where the gears are turning a little bit with the receivers. Mike Evans, hasn't really been connecting with that deep ball, but he's still a big presence there. You have Chris Godwin, obviously. Antonio Brown is really starting to put up some numbers in Tampa Bay. Then, of course, you have Scotty Miller, who once in a while will go and catch a touchdown pass. I just think, Tampa Bay they're starting to click at the right time, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Excuse me. And, what better week to play Tom Brady than the worst pass defense in the league in Atlanta?
He's actually the other guy that I considered here, but went with Goff. Just like Gronkowski was the tight end I considered, but went with Jared Cook. So, almost went that way, especially because of that matchup with Atlanta, which is wild that Atlanta allows that many points to quarterbacks and then is like sixth best against running backs. But anyway, the quarterback matchup, wow, that I hate, surprisingly. And again, this is one of those guys I know he's going to be in your lineup if you have him. He has to be. He's going to be in one of my playoff lineups.
I think we might have the same guy.
It's Russell Wilson.
Okay, never mind.
You mentioned Tyler Lockett. Well, yeah, going against Washington, who give up the fifth fewest points to quarterbacks, something like that. They're in the top five. They're a top five defense in real life as well. And he has 5 straight weeks where he's been below what his projection is. So, I'm not saying don't play Russell Wilson. I'm saying you got to temper your expectations for this guy's output against a really, really good and underrated Washington defense who is at 3 levels very good. I think that the one question mark might be in that middle linebacker group, but they can get after the quarterback and they can absolutely defend your receivers. So this is a very good defense, and I don't think Russell Wilson has a field day with him like he did against the Jets, obviously.
Yeah, I'm not going to sit here and let you disrespect John Bostic, former Pittsburgh Steeler, current middle linebacker for a Washington football team.
Oh, man.
2019 Pro Football Focus, highest grade run defender at the middle linebacker position, John Bostic. Put some respect in that man's name. But not completely agree with you. Russell Wilson, for lack of a better term, has been asked, past like 4 or 5 weeks, man. He's
taking himself out of that MVP talk.
Yeah, single-handedly, too. I mean, he's thrown countless bad interception after bad interception. You take into account his offensive line, you take into account the defense is going up against. Like, I completely understand why people would be wary to sit a guy like Russell Wilson. So I completely agree. I was curious to see whether or not we would have the same guy, because my quarterback is also going to be somebody who you're probably going to roll out. But I'm just saying, be a little wary. Deshaun Watson versus the Indianapolis Colts. He's lost a slew of receivers, and he hasn't hit over 20 points since losing everybody. Now, granted, Brandon Cooks was out last week, and Kiki QT kind of had to step up to the plate. He suffered an injury to his funny bone last week that caused him to miss a couple plays on the drive before coming out and eventually returning to the game. But just, with that, and then going up against, just the Indianapolis front seven, who's very, very good at what they do, and combining that with a Texans team who had 7 sacks and 11 quarterback hits last week, just not all hot on Deshaun Watson this week.
I thought you were going Kyler Murray here, just because of the way you were presenting it. But no, I absolutely get that. He's obviously not going to be 100%. I know that there was a little bit of concern there. Will Fuller suspended, Brandon Cooks hurt, Randall Cobb hurt. I mean, unless DeAndre Hopkins is walking back through that door, Deshaun Watson doesn't present a very appealing option, at least for this week. With all due respect to Deshaun Watson, I think he's a star, but he can't do it all on his own. He can do a lot on his own, but not at all. Okay, so with that, let's go to our waiver wire. This is a guy that has been brought up a lot on this show, but not a ton by me. Phillip Rivers goes against Houston this week. He has multiple touchdowns in 4 straight games, believe it or not, and Houston is allowing the 8th most points to the position. Phillip Rivers still not even owned in 40% of Yahoo leagues. I'm not exactly sure why. Again, if you've gotten to this point, you probably have a pretty solid quarterback, but say that you're looking for a streaming option. Maybe you're somebody that somehow got to this point using Taysom Hill the last few weeks, like I almost got to. Phillip Rivers in this matchup would be a guy that I would want to plug in instead of him, and I think that that's absolutely a very appealing option.
Yeah, I feel like I've put Phillip Rivers down as my waiver wire guy for a couple of weeks here in the last month or two, and I just think he's been getting the job done. He's definitely a guy I considered before going with my guy Jalen Hurts. Under 13% of ESPN leagues, I expect after his start on Sunday for that to kind of skyrocket to around 50 or 60% of ESPN leagues. Playing against the Arizona defense, the matchup isn't great. It's not tremendous at all. But he did have 19 points in his first fantasy outing. Like I mentioned earlier, he had over 100 rushing yards on the ground. Anytime you get a guy who could give you that dual threat ability, especially with the quarterback rushing for that 0.1 yards every touch, it's good. It's solid. Especially if the gentleman who asked this question earlier for a superflex league, if you have Jalen Hurts in at a superflex this week, I gotta like your team. I gotta like the chance of scoring points. So yeah, Jalen Hurts 13% ESPN leagues. Go grab him.
Yeah, I mean, I obviously like that a lot. He's a guy that I said to pick up last week, owning just 4% at that time. So it's obviously pumped up a little bit. That, like you said, is going to skyrocket, I assume, by tomorrow. But you talked about, it's a middle of the pack matchup for him. But New Orleans is a very good defense as well, and he did what he did to them. So I think with what he adds on the ground, I don't want to say he's matchup proof. I think it's way too early for that. He's only made one start. But the ability that he has to do that, he could be in a position where he does become matchup proof, where we can start talking about that, because of what he's able to do in that area. My running back, I already mentioned that I was going to bring him up. You can actually play him as a running back or receiver due to that. And there's another receiver that I like a little bit more. I put him as a running back for the waiver wire. It's going to be Lynne Bowden Jr., who goes against New England this week, only owning 3% of fantasy leagues on Yahoo right now. I just looked at the injuries to Devontae Parker, to Jakeem Grant, to Mike Gesicki. If 1, 2, or all 3 of those guys miss their next game, this guy's going to be an absolute target monster for them. And that's crazy to think. A guy that didn't even start the year on their roster. They made a trade for him with the Raiders, even though the Raiders had just taken him in the draft. That was very bizarre to me. But Miami is using him the way that he needs to be used in the NFL right now. They're running a lot of trick stuff with him. They've rolled him out and given him these end arounds where it makes it look like he's going to throw the ball down the field. He played quarterback just last year in college. I mean, this is your typical chess piece, if you will, for an offense. And the way that they're using him is exactly how you want to see him being used. So a guy that you can play in your running back position that's going to be targeted close to 10 times potentially in the passing game like he was last week, I'll take my chances with that for a guy that's on less than 5% at least.
No, most definitely. To kind of hit on your point about Mike Gesicki, they do expect him to miss at least 1 week. I believe the same can be said about Devontae Parker as well. So the wealth of opportunity is definitely opening up for a guy like Lynne Bowden. And speaking of wells of opportunity, this guy hasn't gotten a lot of it, but he's made the most of his so far. Gus Edwards owned in 24% of ESPN leagues going against the Jacksonville Jaguars. If this game is anything like we think it's going to be, the Ravens are going to be running the ball even more than they typically do. Edwards rushed for over 100 yards versus Dallas 2 weeks prior, scored 2 touchdowns last week. He's either hitting the century mark or finding his way to the end zone, really no in between. Mark Ingram not super heavily involved in that game. Gus Edwards, although J.K. Dobbins is starting to kind of get his wheels turning there. No really dominant RB1 in Baltimore, so I wouldn't have super high expectations this week for Gus Edwards. It just depends on what the Ravens want to do. But whenever they do give him the ball, very good things have happened in the last 2 weeks.
Man, I hate that he's in Baltimore because I love Gus Edwards. I'm curious to see what happens with him because I do feel like he could have a lot more opportunity in another backfield somewhere. And I'm curious to see if a team brings in him this offseason and gives him, I'll say it again, the keys to the car.
Right, baby.
My wide receiver is going to be somebody I already talked about, Jalen Rader of the Philadelphia Eagles, who's going against Arizona this week, owning just 22% of Yahoo leagues. He led the team in receiving, not a huge outing, obviously by any means with Jalen Hurts, not really throwing the ball as much as he was, effective on the ground. But I think that I'm just curious, honestly, to see who turns out to be the number one option in this passing attack with Jalen Hurts at the helm of it. And I think that Jalen Rader, a fellow rookie, could absolutely end up being that guy. I mean, they drafted him to be the number one. You took him in the first round. You took him over Justin Jefferson. So he better be the guy, So we'll see. But I just think the opportunity is there for him to carve out a great role and get on the right path and get some rapport going with Jalen Hurts. And I think that it starts this week against Arizona.
Yeah, I don't want to live in a world where a Jalen to Jalen connection is not profitable, at least for the Eagles. So I hope that does get going there. My receiver is actually a former Eagle as well. And with news of Henry Ruggs going on the reserve/COVID list, this is all but a better choice. It's going to be Nelson Aguilar, owned in 38% of ESPN leagues, going up against the Los Angeles Chargers. Not a great matchup by any means. Actually, I think the Chargers rank a little bit higher on the list just in terms of allowing fantasy points to wide receivers on a per game basis. But man, 20, 10, 7 points and back to 21 points last week, his last 4 weeks. A little bit inconsistent, but man, whenever Derek Carr is on, which has been more weeks than not here in 2020, Nelson Aguilar has been pretty profitable if you've been able to swoop him up on the waiver wire.
Yeah, they play in just a couple days, and as you mentioned, Henry Ruggs going on the COVID list. It's going to be Nelson Aguilar and Darren Waller in that passing attack, in my opinion. You might see a little bit of Hunter Renfrow, who knows, but I think primarily you'll see those two guys, Darren Waller and Nelson Aguilar. So I like that pickup. That's actually another guy that I was looking at. My tight end, and I'm actually very proud of this one. It's kind of off the map here. It's going to be Cole Comet of the Chicago Bears. He played 70% of their snaps. Mitch Trubisky seems to really like him. It's a middle of the road matchup. Minnesota gives up the 17th most points to the position, but he out-targeted Jimmy Graham in their last game 7-4. Now, I know, you looked at the target share for Jimmy Graham when Nick Foles was under center, and it was clearly, even with as many tight ends as they have, it was clear that Jimmy Graham was the number one option in that tight end room. With Mitch Trubisky now coming back into the fold, Cole Komet looks like he could be the guy that Trubisky is looking for down into the red zone. A lot of those targets came in the red zone. So I think that Cole Komet has a great opportunity in front of him, and at a position where, if you're picking this guy up, I don't think that you're in a great spot, but you're throwing a dart at this point, and I think that you should do a lot worse than throwing a dart at Cole Komet, the rookie, who I feel like is really starting to come into his own.
Yeah, a lot of people want to make noise about Jimmy Graham and what he's been able to do in Chicago, and rightfully so, because he has had somewhat of a bounce back year. But Cole Komet has slowly been been kind of eating his way into Jimmy Graham's touches and targets and all that good stuff. Yep, I'm going, exactly in the direction that the Bears wanted him to whenever they took him super high in the draft last year. But we already touched on my guy, Jared Cook, 50% in the ESPN league versus Kansas City, back-to-back double-digit weeks. Chiefs ranked 25th. Versus tight ends on the fantasy point basis. And like you said, man, if you're dipping in the waiver wire at the tight end position, probably like I am this week, kind of throwing shit at a wall and hope it sticks at this point.
There's not a better way to put it. I couldn't have said it better myself. Yeah, I think that pretty much does it. I don't have rocking around the 412 to tell you guys about. That's wrapped up. I did tweet this out, but for anybody that didn't see it, just to give you some numbers, we raised $5,360 this year, which is more than double what we raised last year. We had 82 different people donate to the cause. So unbelievable numbers this year. And we just, we want to shoot for higher than that next year. But 5 families in Tyler and I's area don't have to worry about Christmas this year. And that's what matters most in the year 2020, to be able to, alleviate that financial burden for families, when they have no idea. The one family that we were told, I know that you guys have seen Stubbs, if you listen or watch the show or whatever it might be, you've probably heard me bring up his name before. His girlfriend used to work with somebody, and she had lost her job during all this, and they had just gotten denied for a loan that they applied for to try to be able to buy their kids Christmas gifts. So like we were able to come in at the right time and be able to do this, and that means the world to us. And that's only because of you guys that are watching and listening to this. So again, we can't thank you enough, and we just hope to see these numbers continue to rise next year. So $5,360, man. Yeah. So thank you everybody that played a part in that. We can't thank you enough. And again, just be on the lookout because sooner rather than later, we're going to be starting up year 4. I will tell you guys, I do have a new sponsor to tell you about, but I'll tell you guys about Keith's Barbershop first, which is an old-fashioned barbershop. It's located at 180 Brighton Avenue in Rochester, PA. He's open 11 to 7 Tuesday through Friday and 9 to 4 on Saturday. Every Tuesday, he has $5 off for military personnel, first responders, and nurses. So yeah, as you guys know, we are part of the Crowworthy Network, and we got a new sponsor over there at the Crowworthy Network. So it's a company that is called Bench Clears. Now, it's very unique what they do. It's essentially like an NHL jersey material, but it's in tank top form. And if you use the code Crowworthy at checkout, just one word, you get 20% off your order. So go to benchclears.com and get in your order. It's just in time for the holiday. In time for the NHL season starting back up, by the way, which is in a month from today, hopefully, the expected date. So go to benchclears.com, check out their assortment of men's and women's Penguins options. Well, they are a tank top look. They have an NHL jersey feel to them and a really unique look. Check them out once again at benchclears.com. Check out their options. Use code Crowworthy, just one word, at checkout for 20% off your order. That's Crowworthy, CROWWORTHY, just one word. I'm very interested in that.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept for sure. I would need to go and look for myself to see whether or not I could rock those.
Yeah, tank form, dude. Just be able to suns out, guns out in January. No, but yeah, looking forward to having this sponsorship and this partnership with them. So go check them out and get 20% off if you like what you see. Other than that, it's been Smitty. It's been Donnie. We can't thank you enough for listening to another episode of the Around the 412 Fantasy Football Show. This has been a presentation of Crowworthy, where winners are serving winners coast to coast with sports, gambling, fantasy, and more. Follow us on Twitter at Around the 412. Follow them at Crowworthy. Visit the Pittsburgh City page at crowworthy.com for podcasts just like this one, blogs like the ones from your boy, and more. Until next time, good luck, and we'll see you then. Bye-bye.